Wild almonds. You probably have a bag of these in your kitchen right now, but if you found them in the wild 10,000 years ago, they would be your last meal. These are almonds, but wild almonds are nature's version of a cyanide pill because they contain a chemical called amygdalin. When you chew them, your saliva turns that chemical into pure hydrogen cyanide. Just a small handful is enough to shut down your organs in minutes. Therefore, for most of human history, almonds weren't food, they were a death sentence. But then, a miracle happened. A single tree had a genetic glitch and stopped producing the poison. Ancient farmers found this one safe tree and started cloning it. Therefore, every sweet almond you eat today is a descendant of that one specific accident. But keep this in mind, if you ever bite into an almond and it tastes intensely bitter, spit it out immediately. Your body is trying to save your life. Pokeweed. They look like delicious forest grapes, but if you find them in your backyard, don't touch them. This is pokeweed. Every single part, from the roots to those purple berries, is filled with toxins that cause severe internal distress. But for generations in the American South, people actually turned this poison into a legendary dish called poke salad. Therefore, the cooking process had to be perfect. You have to boil the leaves, dump the poison water, and repeat the whole thing 3 separate times before it's safe. It became a staple during hard times because it was free and grew everywhere. But even today, foragers warn that if you see a hint of red on the stem, the plant is too old and the poison is too strong to cook out. Therefore, it's a meal that requires total respect for the rules. But one tiny mistake, and dinner becomes your worst nightmare. Swill milk. You think of milk as a healthy drink, but in the 1850s, a specific type called Swill Milk killed thousands of people. This happened because greedy distilleries in New York kept cows in filthy stalls and fed them hot, alcoholic waste left over from making whiskey. Therefore, the cows became sickly and their milk turned a disgusting bluish color. But the owners didn't stop selling it. They added plaster of Paris, starch, and sugar to make the milk look white and creamy again. And parents had no idea they were feeding their children a toxic chemical cocktail. But the truth finally came out after 8,000 children died in a single year. This horror is the reason we have food safety laws today. Therefore, every time you check an expiration date, you're looking at the legacy of the Swill Milk scandal. Ergot. Imagine eating a slice of bread and suddenly seeing demons. But this wasn't a nightmare. It was real life in the Middle Ages. These people were victims of ergot. It's a fungus that grows on rye grain during damp seasons. Therefore, when farmers harvested their grain, they were accidentally harvesting a powerful psychedelic chemical. But they had no idea eating this bread caused holy fire, a disease that made your skin feel like it was burning off. The entire villages would start hallucinating or having seizures at the same time. But the craziest part is that many historians believe ergot caused the Salem Witch Trials. Therefore, those witches were likely just innocent people suffering from a bad batch of bread. But keep this in mind, we still use this fungus today to make medicine. It is a fine line between a cure and a curse. Raw elderberries. Elderberries are known as a superfood that can stop a cold in its tracks. But if you eat them straight off the bush, they might be your last snack. This is because raw elderberries contain a chemical that turns into cyanide inside your body. Therefore, eating a handful of raw berries can cause intense vomiting or even put you in a coma. But the secret to unlocking their power is heat. You must cook them thoroughly to destroy the toxins. Therefore, that elderberry syrup in your kitchen is perfectly safe. But foragers warn that you must never let a single stem or leaf fall into your cooking pot. Those parts are even more poisonous than the berries, but nature's best medicine is also one of its sneakiest traps: Atlantic pufferfish. This looks like a cute, squishy balloon, but inside this fish is enough poison to kill 30 adults. This is the Atlantic pufferfish, also known as the sugar toad. It contains tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin that shuts down your muscles while you stay wide awake. Therefore, if you eat the wrong part, you will become paralyzed and stop breathing. But there is no known antidote. Therefore, doctors can only wait and hope the poison wears off. But in places like the Chesapeake Bay, people have eaten them for years. They call them sugar toads because the meat is sweet like chicken. Therefore, the chef must be a master of the knife. One tiny nick of the liver or skin can contaminate the whole meal, but most people wouldn't risk it. Therefore, every bite is a literal gamble with your life. Green absinthe. They call it the green fairy. But for over 100 years, this drink was illegal in most of the world. This is absinthe. It's made with a herb called wormwood, which contains a chemical called thujone. Therefore, people believed it caused hallucinations, madness, and even murder. But the truth is much simpler. Absinthe was just incredibly strong alcohol, sometimes 70% or more. Therefore, famous artists like Van Gogh weren't seeing fairies, they were just suffering from severe alcohol poisoning. But the mystery made it a legend. Therefore, even though it's legal again today, people still drink it with a sense of fear. But keep this in mind, it won't make you see monsters, but it will definitely give you the worst headache of your life. Castor beans. They look like beautiful speckled stones, but they are actually the deadliest seeds on Earth. These are castor beans. They contain ricin, a poison so powerful that a single bean is enough to end a human life. But if you ever see these growing in a garden, stay far away. But here is the weird part. We use these seeds to make castor oil. Therefore, you might have a product from this deadly plant in your medicine cabinet right now. But don't panic. The ricin is left behind during the pressing process and destroyed by heat. Therefore, the oil is safe, but the bean is a biological weapon. But remember, nature loves to hide its deadliest secrets in the prettiest packages. Rhubarb leaves. You've probably enjoyed a delicious strawberry rhubarb pie, but if you ever tried to eat the leaves, you wouldn't be here to talk about it. Rhubarb leaves are packed with oxalic acid, a chemical that forms sharp crystals in your kidneys. Therefore, eating them causes your throat to swell and your internal organs to fail. But during World War I, people were actually told to eat them as a vegetable to save food. Therefore, many people ended up in the hospital or worse. But the stalks are perfectly safe and tasty. Therefore, the rule for rhubarb is simple. Eat the red, throw away the green. But one wrong choice in the garden and your dessert becomes a disaster. Death cap. It looks like a regular mushroom you'd find at a grocery store. But this is the death cap, the most dangerous fungus on Earth. It is responsible for 90% of all mushroom-related deaths worldwide. But here is the most terrifying part. It actually tastes delicious. Therefore, foragers often eat a full meal of them, thinking they've found a treat. But once you swallow, the amatoxins start melting your liver from the inside. Within hours, you are in a fight for your life. But then, a false recovery happens. You feel perfectly fine for a day or two. Therefore, you think you've survived. But the damage is already done and your organs eventually shut down. Therefore, the rule is simple. Never eat a wild mushroom unless you are 100% certain, because nature doesn't give second chances. Manchineel. In the Caribbean, it's known as the little apple of death. But it's not just the fruit you have to worry about. This is the manchineel tree. It is so poisonous that you can't even stand under it during a rainstorm. Therefore, the raindrops pick up the tree's toxic sap and burn your skin like battery acid. But the fruit is the real trap. It looks and smells just like a sweet, tiny lime. Therefore, hungry tourists often take a bite, but the sweetness quickly turns into an agonizing fire in your throat. Therefore, your airway begins to swell shut. It is the only tree in the world that usually requires a warning sign. But keep this in mind. Even the smoke from burning its wood can blind you. Therefore, stay far away from this beautiful nightmare. Water hemlock. It looks exactly like a harmless wild carrot or a parsnip, but this is the most violently toxic plant in North America. It's called water hemlock. Every single part of this plant is filled with cytotoxin, a poison that attacks your brain and nervous system. Therefore, just one small bite can cause massive seizures in minutes. But the scariest part is the smell. The roots have a sweet, pleasant aroma that mimics food. People often mistake it for a snack while hiking, but there is no second chance with this plant. Therefore, if you don't get help immediately, your muscles will simply stop working. But foragers have a golden rule. If it looks like a carrot but grows in a swamp, stay away. Therefore, your curiosity isn't worth your life. Subscribe right now. I need to pay my bills.